Josie, welcome to the roundtable. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling really good. Thank you for having me.
Girl, it is such a pleasure to have you on here. Given you are the program manager at Sister, we happen to have conversations like this all the time. So, on top of your very busy job here at Sister, you're a mother to a 3-year-old boy. You are studying a Bachelor of Law and Arts at the University of the South Pacific. And before you even came to Sister, you were a journalist and marketing executive. There are three things that I would love to speak with you about today. So, one is the bus fare increase, the other is the high profile cases that we're seeing of members of parliament, and then the most recent that we've seen of the Shefa Provincial Government Council passing a controversial new law that forbids women from operating food stalls, roadside markets, or preparing food for sale during their menstruation. I think it's important to highlight, though, that probably by the time this episode goes to air, it would be, I don't know what progress that this bylaw will be at, but I still think it's worth having a conversation about. So before we jump into any of that, let's talk about the bus fare. So girl, tell me, what is your experience in catching a bus? Like, what's your day to day? What's that like?
So I live fairly close to, work and to university as well, but I always say I don't catch the bus because it's a luxury. I catch a bus because of the convenience. Really, it's like I'm paying for that extra time that I get to save by taking a bus instead of walking because, walking would be 15 minutes. But if I take a bus, it's 5 minutes. So it's really about the fact that it's convenient and it's quick. But that really defeats the whole purpose of me catching a bus. It really defeats the whole purpose of me catching a bus if I take a bus and it decides to go all the way into town or the other side of town before it comes to work. So for me, really, it's it's a win or a lose some days, Some days I catch a bus, they come right to where I'm trying to go. But other days I catch a bus and it takes me around the country and then to work. So it's always,
So it's mostly
work and school. So from here to university, from work to university, it's about it should be just 5 minutes. You make a little turn and I'm at university. But the traffic really defeats the purpose of it. So why would I ever catch a bus to university? Because around that time, if I'm doing after hours, I'm going up there. There's a massive traffic jam. So it's always just, to me, I will do public transport and I will do buses when I have to. Like if I have to, I will do it. But if I don't have to, everywhere is walkable. So really that's it. It's a challenging service to deal with if you're looking for convenience. And I think that that's the reason why a lot of people use it. They're not using it because it's a luxury. They're using it because of the convenience. We're trying to get where we have to get at a certain time really quickly. And that's it.
I mean, look, I have not caught a bus for ages, but I definitely feel that as a driver, there are quite a lot of public transport operators on the road. I recently just saw that our government has passed a bill to amend the public land transport law. So basically, it just reduces the number of the board members from 10 to 6 members, and they comprise of local authorities, tourism, public works, Vanuatu police, traffic unit, internal affairs, and the provincial land transport associations. And I understand that this structure has happened to prevent personal interests benefiting the members of the board and ensuring there's that separation. And, I think that we're gonna kind of see a big change in the public transport system in the coming few months with this new board structure, including a bus fare increase. So we've been talking about this for years, this bus fare increase. And I always think of people who have to catch buses every day. You don't live very far, but you still have to pay 150 Vadu for wherever you go. The last time we had an increase was in 2014, where they increased the bus fare from 100 Vadu to 150 Vadu. So we hit the streets and we asked people about the possible increase in bus fares and what they would expect to get in return. And this is what they had to say.
Me use one way Mr. use to pass every day, the daily commute to me. Pami talem se poswe bus fare ko anda. Me want to look on better roads. All possibly yumi to block tayo start of like hambak kutula bus. Wanna something hemi all bus stop Wili kat kava lo time we rain. Yumi evran yumi save ko height and then it bus stop and bus. Yeah, and thank you.
Contact lo 200. Maskara mi ko butu mi lo straight way pa mi call him. Mi no ando se vai komple se vai butu mi lo way no mo pa mi try ng leg mi ko town. From Brisbane mi town lo lelo town lo. Mi hemi sta butu mi anda lo road no mo main road no mo.
No, mi akri se pass fe pa masko antaplo 200 from se. Mi tu mi kat one pass pe mi look se pass. Then iron ikolo one place where people are long for distance so same lo rent a bar or lo mele we suppose 1 month 2 months no more but depend 150 or 300 after me look say no enough fair a pass must go 200 from and now yeah 150 me look say it's small too much.
Yes, we want them bus fare equal to 200. From bus fare stablo 150 long time. So from when me tell them say bus fare go on that. Scale, yumi black man, yumi no got business now. Business premier now transport, bus, more taxi. So no blame me black man. The block on bit with the more Chinese. Sorry, in Sako make more so business me black man. So but you go to store, you look everybody's price you want that. You go to market blame, local market blame me. Price you want that. Pay look at me pay me service. Ale me pay business license. Mi permit lo mi permit lo pass ale land transport ale mi pen public works so mi look paper tu you conduct tu paper di conduct so mi look say pass pay must conduct.
I think it's important to consider the operating costs of owning a bus, which includes the maintenance and repairs, the wages for the driver, fuel, insurance, road tax, probably loan repayments for the owner. So I totally get how it benefits the driver to see this increase from 150 Vadu to 200 Vadu. But as a consumer, what do you want to see for that extra 50 Vadu? What is the change that you would like to see?
I mean, I totally understand that there are costs with like owning a vehicle, buses, as with every other vehicle, you know. But first of all, I think that it's completely unfair to just look at the cost just for the vehicle itself or the vehicle owner themselves, so public transport service providers. But we also have to look at the other, you know, side of the coin, which is an everyday consumer. I'm not catching a bus because I have a vehicle. I'm catching a bus because I don't have a vehicle. And we have to consider as well, you know, the minimum wage. How much is that? You know, you lift it to 200. Minimum wage is 36,000. 200, you go and you come each day for work. That's 2,000 a week. And then in the long run, that's like 8,000 a month. That's a significant amount. It really does add up. And, you know, if you're asking for that extra 50 Vatu, we really do need to see certain changes in like the quality of the service itself, the quality of the vehicles that are going into public, you know, to be public transport, but also about the convenience bit. I'm like hooked onto that bit. You have a route, and that's, I think some of these
like a
things.
fixed route?
Have a fixed route, you know? Go just in one direction even. The worst thing that could happen as a person who's catching a bus is I'm trying to go to number 2 and the bus driver tells me, yeah, I'm going to go to number 2, like get in. And then the bus driver goes all the way to Corman. And now I'm late for a meeting, but I'm halfway to Teoma.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous. And things like that are very practical. They're a practical thing, and I think that they're things that we can ask for that extra 50 Vatu. So yeah, if you want that 50 Vatu, those changes do need to happen.
But okay, look, when I think of the fixed route then, so if we have fixed routes, but we just have a blanket 200 Vadu, and again, you just live literally around the corner, I don't understand why we're not looking at kind of mitigating the cost of the service, like, I don't know, per kilometer, or because right now, like, you know, you just pay 150 Vadu and it just takes you from here to Tasariki to number 2 to, and it just seems like it's a sloppy analysis of just trying to get revenue, or it's not a proper measurement is what I'm really trying to say.
I think there's also that option of getting meters. Like other countries do it, and they've been very, they've been very effective in making sure that the person who's the passenger only gets to pay for what service they're receiving to a certain extent. So, of course, that means that if you're going further, then you get to be paid a certain price. You get to pay a certain price that only fits the amount of the service you receive. And I feel like that would be particularly useful if you live in a rural community. Like, you have to go further, and I'm not really sure who really sets the prices now. I know from here to, let's say, like Lelepa Landing, if I catch a bus, I have to transit first, and that'll be 150 to where I'm trying to transit, and it'll be 500 to me going to the landing. So that's 500 and 150. But who determines that 500 Vatu? Like,
I would imagine it would be the Public Land Transport Authority. Like, I think really with this new amendment that we're going to see these more structured prices, and that it's what the public is asking for. Clean air conditioning would be great.
Would be wonderful.
Safety training for the drivers, especially us as women. I think that's super, super important. And us who have children, I've often thought of that as well. What are the bus routes for children after school and mothers are working? I'm really hoping to see these changes. And I saw this article from the Vanuatu Business Review from 2022. This just shows how long this conversation has been going on for. And they basically said, look, if you're going to restructure the system, then we need to really consider the enforcement of vehicle standards, allow fares to be varied within set limits, consider fixed public transport routes, and a review of the cap number of licenses issued. Because that's another issue that I'm seeing, is that there are so many buses that are on the road. They're not safe. They're causing traffic. Speaking of changes, we have seen quite a few members of parliament in the spotlight recently, all at the same time. Not sure if it's really for good reason or not. We have had MP Simeon Siule, who was convicted of theft for unlawfully taking a government vehicle and was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months, though both he and the public prosecutor have appealed. It was denied. Then we have the Minister of Education, who's facing allegations of improper distribution of 250 chainsaws worth 12.2 million Batu. The ministry denies any wrongdoing and claims the records were misinterpreted. Then we have Health Minister John Stiltari, who's awaiting trial on charges of intentional assault and public disorder from an incident outside the Grand Hotel in 2024. MPJ Welle and a former Public Works Director have been charged with 56 counts relating to misappropriation and misuse of 1.7 million Baru in public funds, with court proceedings ongoing. Ifate Rural MP Jesse Luo is on bail facing 9 criminal charges, including perjury and deception, and his case has been committed for the Supreme Court for trial. With so many MPs now before the courts, are more leaders creating more crimes, or are our laws and justice system finally doing their job?
I definitely do think that this has more to do with the judiciary system becoming more effective, a crackdown on corruption. Because I definitely do think that people in power have been committing crimes because of that power imbalance for ages. But this time, I think it has more to do with our judiciary system being, more effective. Everybody's taking these matters more seriously because we're starting to become more aware of the fact that they are problems.
I think it's a really good thing too. I mean, it's really sad to see, but I also feel that as a citizen, it's really good to see our leaders being held to the same account. But yet still, when I go on social media and you see the comments, there are still so many people who try to make these leaders an exception to the rules. So you'll often hear these comments about forgiveness, or they try to outweigh his good deeds to forget the crime they've committed. And I'm not sure why people do that. What makes them more above the law than us?
I really agree with you on that, because I've been seeing a lot of it as well. And I think it goes without saying, you just have to look at the way that people respond to these kind of these cases coming up, that we have a real challenge with holding our leaders accountable and really separating the reality that holding our leaders accountable does not delegitimize the fact that they've done very good in positions of leadership. But just because they have done good does not mean that then now they're allowed to do something like this. And they are the highest level of role modeling that we can do for our country, you know? If we do have that standard for them and we have different standards for people, for other people, for just the regular everyday person, that really says something about whether or not leadership in this country is going to be accountable and transparent. But also it says a lot about how we treat, you know, just our regular day people. And the reality of it is if we don't have the same standard for our leaders, then that really sends a message that our systems are not strong. And what does that mean for implementation when it comes to every other crime, you know? And this big man mindset is something that we talk about a lot, you know? We put them to a certain level and then we get so frustrated when it's like, why isn't this happening? Or why aren't our leaders doing this? Or why does this keep happening? But we ourselves are the ones that allow this to continue happening because we cannot separate what is actual criticism of their leadership and their personal lives. Like, yes, they can do well, and an attack, and it's not an attack when we hold them accountable, but if you see it as an attack and that attack is on their personal lives and their families, that's not what accountability is, especially as a leader, you know? When you go into leadership, you set yourself up to be viewed as a person who sets a standard, who is a role model.
And now we're seeing out them public servant as well. Like they're meant to be of service to us.
You can't go in and then you treat it like this is your kitchen, this is your community, this is your, you know, it's not that. This is an actual legitimate office that has committed itself to a service and to a standard that, you know, has morals and has values, and you committed yourself to that. So we have to hold them accountable to that standard and to deliver those services that they said they would, you know, deliver.
But then how do we actually do that?
I think one of the things that I will say we already do very well is we talk so much. We like to talk and criticize like almost everything. I think that I know people always say like, oh, we're keyboard warriors, we complain about everything. But the reality is we see, you know, if you shift the way that you look at that, we see an opportunity to be better in everything we do. So when it comes to this, one thing that you can do, I think, is through media, right? When news stories in media, they write about the stories of corruption and wrongdoing well before we even get a court case. But people are so quick to attack the media, but they take the court case so legitimately. But what was the difference? When they brought that up as something that we should be looking at critically, people will attack whoever, you know,
like the messenger, but not look at the value and the content of the story. What is it trying to say? So a legal case is something that is brought up and then people are like, that's a legitimate problem. But we need to be able to look critically at what's already before us. That's, you know, just from there, you can ask, you know, can I see my leader? I want to speak to my representative. What is happening here? Why didn't you do this? Why did you do that? Is this true? These are things that we can do from information that's already available, but it's like we think they're so separate from us. No, they should be available to us to speak to them about these things. It shouldn't be something that we come to after the fact in a court case or in court. I agree with you, Josie. I think it doesn't have to be a court case to be a legitimate concern. And I think we really have to start to build a culture where we're not afraid to ask questions about anything that we think is not in our country's best interests, and to be able to ensure that we have leaders who are thinking of us in our future. And I think that leads to our last topic. That makes me really wonder about how decisions are being made behind the scenes and what kind of consultations take place and how often our leaders are actually talking to the people before they decide to pass laws. So in November, we had the Shefa Provincial Government Council pass a controversial bylaw that forbids women from operating food stalls, roadside markets, or preparing food for sale during their menstruation. This means that enforcement officers have the power to cancel food stall permits, and that any person found in violation may face a fine of up to 20,000 Vadu or imprisonment for up to 3 months or both? I would love to know what your immediate thoughts were when you heard this.
My immediate thoughts was, this is ridiculous. Like, this is so silly. I've never heard a more unenforceable law. And when I think about how you could possibly enforce such a thing, I shiver. Ridiculous. I don't think there's much more to say. I feel that is the majority consensus on, reaction to hearing this.
Definitely an instinctive reaction from mine too. I mean, look, as we filmed this segment, we just had the Prime Minister in the past 2 hours come out to revoke it, calling to revoke it. And he said it's such a misguided and unenforceable law, which will only serve to embarrass the province and the country as a whole. I mean, look, I have to say, when I first heard this incident, after thinking, how do they enforce this? Like, what, are you gonna track women's menstrual cycles? Are you going to check if they have their menstruation? Like, everything is a violation of human rights. And so I really wanted to give the Secretary General of the Shefa Provincial Government Council the benefit of the doubt. And I thought maybe his central concern was that roadside markets and roadside food stalls just didn't have access to clean, fresh water, and that, he was worried about hygiene. And he just took an extreme option to just say, you know what? You women can't work during your menstruation, rather than going through the really important but difficult efforts of installing wash systems so that everyone has access to clean and safe water. Then Lionel Kalawat actually defended himself by saying the clause relating to menstruating women draws on ancestral teachings and traditions that emphasize hygiene and respect. So in the Daily Post article, he actually said, "We took it in the context of customary practice that the bylaw will protect and preserve the practices we learned from our ancestors, even from biblical times. I'm happy that we can uphold and preserve these traditions." Can you understand his position at all?
I can't say I do. And I see a lot of people also, I'm forming my opinion, and I'm looking at other people's opinions as well around this, subject, around around how it's biblical, around how it's in relation to custom and culture. I think where custom and culture is concerned, there definitely are traditions and customs for certain places where you're not allowed to do that, or you're not supposed to do that. And it's something that they enforce in the home. And it's just a practice. It's a fasin where people only can't finish, like, for their own homes. It's not something that's ever been instigated in a bylaw, but it is something that people practice in their homes. And the thing about that is, not all cultures have that. Not all customs have that as one of their practices or their teachings. But this is a Shefa bylaw. It kind of covers a large amount of places, a large amount of customs, like different custom and different culture. So it's like enforcing a set standard on a big group of people who don't necessarily have the same custom or have the
it's
same.
Shefa, right?
Yeah.
Like, everyone, I think we are the province, especially Ifate, where there are people from all over the islands here. So I feel that it's enforcing a cultural practice that has got nothing to do with you. I feel that if it was something where, supposed to be stand inside the house, you. But meeting se pa no sabe talamon something.
Yeah.
But lo make him say all mom or mama
that don't necessarily come from the same, like, fasin or custom, and a lot of people have also had conversations around it on the biblical side, and how they're trying to draw it from Old Testament times. And the reality of it is, a lot of things that we do today in current practice would not have, God would not have let that fly in Old Testament times. And this is one of them. But that was in Old Testament times. And some people have been able to articulate that very clearly. I'm not even going to attempt to, but I think it's worth the thinking around it, Like, things are no longer the same. But also this very important part around the custom, and you trying to cover everybody around a custom that doesn't necessarily involve them. But I will say something that I've been really impressed about is the amount of women who have come online to join these discussions and participate and use this opportunity to educate men on menstruation and the menstrual cycle for women. Great use of the opportunity. Now that we're in the spotlight, for once, we can talk about these things because it's a huge taboo. One thing that has come from this is that now that menstruation is a topic up for discussion, women are really using the opportunity to talk to communities about this is the reality about menstruation.
And it's not unclean.
It's not unclean, but
cycle of life. This is what
Exactly.
happens. The egg drops because we haven't been able to conceive.
Yeah.
It's actually probably the most sacred blood and the sacred time for a woman in that specific time of the month.
Yeah. So one thing that this bylaw conversation has, done is it's taken a taboo away from a subject that, prior nobody would have been talking about. But now we're talking about our homes and this, cycle, how we treat women and girls when they're on their periods, how long they usually go on their periods. And it's an opportunity for educating even now.
Because with that, right, when people were talking about, look, this is the usual cycle of days, does that mean that if a woman is on her menstruation, that she has to take sick leave? Who is going to compensate for that? Because as you said, people are drawing from the biblical times, but the reality is, yumi stalo 2025, ol woman está walk. One day of missing out on selling food or preparing food, that's income, that's a school fee. And so who is going to compensate for that? It's one thing to want to preserve these customs or these ideas, but the reality is that people need to put food on the table and send their children to school. And that if you are going to attempt to enforce a law like that, who's going to compensate? Is the Shefa Provincial Council going to give money for the days of work missed? The real practical part of it, I think, was not discussed. And it really makes me wonder about the consultation process. Like, did they actually speak to women?
Health professionals.
Health professionals. What happened there? And it does make me question the leadership, because it does make me concerned that this is something that is it's not part of this day and age. To be able to tell women how to work. Because again, I really want to emphasize that custom is very important lo yumi lo Vanuatu, but lo enblade, mama lo yumi, that is what dictates what we are. And this bylaw is in complete contradiction of Article 5, where all persons are entitled to the following fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual without discrimination on the grounds of race, place of origin, religious or traditional beliefs, political opinions, language, or sex. I think at the end of the day, mama lo yumi, that is what is the most important thing, and that I really would like to see due process next time. And I hope by the time this airs that
law is revoked.
The law is revoked.
Yeah.
So Josie, what's an issue you think we should be talking about more as a country, but we're not?
Youth political participation. Youth and women political participation. I definitely do think that a lot of what we've discussed today clearly highlights the importance of not only representation, but choosing good leaders. But that also means that the other side of it is that women and young people need to be exercising their voice in an informed way. So we need to be talking about that more, and we need to be able to get them into spaces of conversation where they really want to participate. They want to participate, they see that it's important, and they do. So I think that we need to be talking more about that.
I 100% agree with you. And it's one of the reasons why I absolutely love working in this office and speaking with all of you girls, hearing your voices, your ideas, your energy. It should be amplified more. So I cannot thank you enough for being our guest today. So tell me, my dear, what is your favorite social media platform? And if I had to look through your phone, what information would I find on your newsfeed?
On my newsfeed, I've been trying to stay away from Facebook so much more now, just because of all of the stuff that's happening on it. When I do go on Facebook, things like what we've been looking at yesterday tend to happen. And so I've been avoiding it. But if you do go, my favorite social media platform right now, I would say is Spotify. I don't know if that counts, but I think it counts. It's my favorite social media platform right now. And I'm trying out different podcasts. I'm trying to find something to listen to in my free time.
So what's an account that you would recommend, or that?
Sincerely X with Ted. So with TEDx, they have a podcast and they talk about like different stories of different people's lives. And what I recently listened to was around DNA testing and somebody's experience with it, the bad side and the good side to it, and just the journey of how it really affected their lives. And I really loved that. And then another one that I listened to was about a person who's a ghostwriter, but he doesn't ghostwrite for like political speeches or whatnot. He ghostwrites for little personal things like eulogies or like wedding speeches. And so the podcast host was kind of conversating with them around like that kind of takes away the deeply personal touch that those very, very important pieces of writing have to have. And kind of he stands his ground and he talks about why it doesn't, and why from his perspective it's just him aiding somebody with a significant barrier towards something meaningful. And I really love that.
I think that is the most randomest and most unexpected thing I expected to hear from you. Thank you so much for surprising me with that. And I will go and I will listen to that.
Yeah, you should. And they have so many different subjects they talk about, but I particularly really like those two. I listened to them yesterday.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Josephine, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.